Hmm.
Hey Brenda, can you tell him, the guy, I keep on forgetting, like,
Sorry, is anyone else online not hearing anything?
I'm not hearing it either. And I didn't see any
Yeah.
place we could put something in the chat, so.
No.
Anyone we know there in person that we could alert that they are muted?
Looks like
I texted Representative Anderson, who's the ranking co-chairman on this, I believe. So I just let him know.
thank you.
How is it now?
Thank you, Mary. We can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Casey Larkin, our clerk. So the purpose of this group is to see if we can,
Figure out how to shut up my sound.
oh, right here.
Is it?
Right up here.
Yeah.
So,
Oh.
yeah.
This-
Yeah, it's a cancellation. So the purpose of this group is to see if we can come up with recommendations for legislation for riparian buffers. The first question that, well, I'll get to that later. But that is our purpose. And one of the first questions we looked at, Representative Anderson's suggestion, we asked OLR to give us a report on the other New England states and whether they all had riparian protection. And it turns out they did. And you did get your report right in the email. Everyone has that. Okay. So that's my intention in working on the task force. My co-chair, Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Ms. Mazinski. I want to thank you all for joining us at our first meeting of the Riparian Working Group. The group was created to take a closer look at how Connecticut can better protect riparian areas, those critical green spaces along our rivers and streams, while also protecting private property rights. Those of you here know healthy riparian areas help protect water quality, reduce flooding, support wildlife, and help protect Long Island Sound. I appreciate all the expertise in this room. I know some of you personally or from testimony before the Environment Committee. This is the first working group that I've been on, so I'm a rookie next to a veteran. But there seemed to be no lack of interest to join this group, which is good, a good sign. A lot of enthusiasm, people who want to be here. So I'm looking forward to thoughtful, constructive discussion that will lead to optimum policy approach to protecting riparian areas. Thank you.
So can we go around and have the members introduce themselves first, the ones in the room and then the ones online? Starting with Alan. And who do you represent?
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm Alan Siniscalchi, and I'm the president of the Connecticut Association of Conservation and Wetland Commissions. So I'm trained as a biologist, but also worked in public health, including public health preparedness and dealing with issues, including natural issues such as storm impacts. So our members, which represent all the towns in Connecticut, we have Conservation Commission members and Inland Wetland Agency members are very interested in this topic. The Wetlands Commissions regulate it, and the Conservation Commissions see the value of these buffers and zones. So we're very excited to be a part of this discussion. Thank you.
Alicia?
We going my way?
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Alicia Sharmett. I'm the Executive Director of Rivers Alliance of Connecticut. We're an organization that focuses primarily on policy, advocacy, and education on all water issues. Rivers, lakes, ponds, streams, groundwater, drinking water, everything. Everything touches water and water touches everything. This has been an extremely important issue for us. We've spent several years gathering information And so we're really looking forward to helping to bring about a situation where our local inland wetlands commissions can help wild our edges, meaning that we can have these vegetated strips that are going to protect our communities from flooding, that are going to actually improve our water quality over the next decade, instead of seeing losses as we see an increase in precipitation and very large storms over the years. So I've worked with many of you in a lot of circles, but I also see new faces that I'm looking forward to getting to know. And thank you for allowing us to participate in this.
Hi, good morning. My name is Mike D'Amico, State Representative from Farmington. I've been a member of the Environment Committee for several years. I am honored to have been asked by the co-chairs to be a member of this group. I know we will have disagreements because that's what we do around here, but I am confident and hopeful that we will come to an agreement and make really good recommendations, as is our charge, and I'm quoting from the legislation, to protect vegetated riparian buffers and to improve the health of and protect the resources of the state's watercourses consistent with private property rights. So that's a mouthful, but I think that encapsulates what we're trying to do here, and I'm confident that we will be able to do it because we have a lot of conscientious and smart people here around the table and on Zoom. So thank you again to the chairs.
Good morning. Oh, hello. Good morning. Phil Monero here from the DOT. Excited to be a member of the working group. Looking forward to working with everybody here.
Morning, Joey Jeremiah. Our family's been farming in Wallingford for over 100 years and working on the fourth generation. My oldest daughter is in ag school right now. We also farm in New York and Rhode Island. As a greenhouse grower, most greenhouse growers have riparian areas on their farms, and this would affect it. And we really appreciate being part of this process. Look forward to hearing ideas and concerns from our colleagues. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Joan Nichols. I'm a private consulting forester. I've been practicing forestry in Connecticut for over 35 years. I'm also a technical service provider for the last 12 years to the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, where I work with private landowners utilizing the Environmental Quality Incentive Program cost share funding. I manage thousands of acres of private forest land for private forest landowners, primarily in Eastern Connecticut. And this is a very important subject matter, not only for myself as a practicing forester, but also to guide the forest practices recommendations that I make for private landowners on a daily basis. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Frank DeFelice. I'm a retired electrical engineer, and for the past 10 years, I've had the privilege of serving as the chair of the Regional Planning Commission for the Lower Connecticut River Valley Council of Governments. I also serve as the chair of the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Commission for the town of Durham, as well as the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission for the town of Durham, Connecticut. Positions I've held for the past more than 10 years. So it's a pleasure to join you for this working group.
I remember your testimony very vividly.
Thank you.
I'm Representative Mary Mashinsky from the 85th District in Wallingford.
Yeah, I already spoke, but Rep. Mark Anderson from the 62nd District with the Upper Farmington River and part of the Lower Farmington River, wild and scenic. So really happy to be part of this.
State Rep. Doug Dubitsky. I sit on the Environment Committee, the Planning and Development Committee, and the Judiciary Committee, each of which would have some input into any legislation that would affect the ability of property owners to use their land. I also represent about 200 square miles of Eastern Connecticut, over 8 towns. There are a lot of farms and other uses of land in those towns. So I kind of am looking out for their unique perspective in the discussion of how land is used in the state. And I look forward to a good, healthy conversation on how to protect the riparian zones while protecting private property.
Saved by the bell. Good morning. Martin Heft, Undersecretary at the Office of Policy and Management, Intergovernmental Policy and Planning Division. One of the units that I oversee is the Office of Responsible Growth. For those that don't know, is responsible for helping the legislature put together the State Plan of Conservation and Development. One of the other roles that I do is I'm also chair of the Water Planning Council for the state of Connecticut. And I come to you with 20 years of municipal experience and 18 years of state experience.
Hello, my name is Bill Lucy. I'm the Long Island Soundkeeper, and I work for an organization called Save the Sound, which is a bi-regional group. And our charge is the health and productivity of Long Island Sound. So it's extremely important to have healthy watersheds in order to have a healthy Long Island Sound. Our group is also heavily involved in restoration, including riparian areas. So we have direct interest in this. And then on a personal note, one of my past lives, I worked for the USDA Forest Service, and I was the small-scale timber guy for our district. And so I have extensive experience working with logging riparian areas and salmon streams. Thank you.
Good morning, Bill Hyatt. I'm here representing the Fisheries Advisory Council. I'm also on the board of a number of different sportsmen's organizations, the Fisheries Advisory Council, the Connecticut Fly Fishing Association, the Connecticut River Salmon Association, and Friends of Connecticut Sportsmen. Prior to retiring, I had a 38-year career with DEEP. My last 10 years were spent as Bureau Chief of Bureau of the Natural Resources. I think I'm going to bring to this group, I think my role will be to bring an angler's perspective, but also to bring a perspectives on fish and wildlife science and what they say about riparian buffers. Thank you.
My name is Charles Vidic. I'm the Senior Project Manager with Western Connecticut Council of Governments. I've had an extensive career in Connecticut nationwide. Prior to my work with the Council of Governments, I was a corporate manager of corporate sustainability initiatives for the Postal Service nationwide out of headquarters, Washington, D.C., responsible for all the environmental programs of the agency, including riparian corridor protections, in which we did a lot of work in the Chesapeake Bay area, which is really the crucible for where a lot of this riparian corridor work has gone on. And I represented the agency in that work over the years. And on top of that, because of my involvement over the years, about 25 to 30 years in the area of riparian corridor watershed protections, and amongst many other things, recently we did a study about 3 years ago called "A Case for Riparian Corridor Protections, Zoning Strategies to Reduce Pollution of Inland Waters and Resultant Hypoxia of Long Island Sound." This study also reviewed all of the regulations of New England, and was one of the reasons we realized Connecticut needed to do something. On top of that, we did a more recent study called the Safeguarding Public Water Supply Watersheds, which reviewed all 50 states on riparian corridors along with watershed issues. So we have been promoting this in our municipalities, and we've been working with 3 municipalities in Western Connecticut to promote the idea of riparian corridor protections. So I bring that to the table, and I am not Francis Pickering, although he may show up on the screen over here. We'll see where he shows up.
Okay, but he sent you, correct? You're 55?
Yes.
Okay. So you're representing the right piece of this puzzle. So we're good. Thank you. Mary?
I'm Mary Rickle-Pelletier, and I represent the Park River Regional Watershed, which is an all-volunteer organization for the 78 square mile Park River Regional Watershed, which flows east of the Metacomet Ridge to the Connecticut River, which is the watershed that we're in and where you park in regularly. I work as an educator and a subcontractor, and most recently I worked with the North Central Conservation District on the update of the 2010 North Branch Park River Regional Watershed Management Plan. I want to mention I'm actually trained as in architectural design, architectural and urban design, and I worked in architecture, urban design, and landscape offices for many years until I began to notice the degradation of nature in our cities. And I got into the work of watershed management in Hartford because of Rutherford Platt. And I began to work on these watershed management plans and recognize the need to conserve whole stream corridors, and that the precedent for this is Frederick Law Olmsted and Frederick Law Olmsted's planning practices, which kept nature in cities, but also conserved landscapes and restored landscapes such as Bushnell Park around the streams that were often polluted that flowed through cities. So in addition to the above, I also have considerable history, family history in public health and agriculture due to my family.
Good morning. My name is William Henley. I'm representing the South Central Connecticut Regional Water Authority, which is a quasi-governmental entity in New Haven that provides drinking water. I'm an aquatic scientist there, specializing in lake and watershed science.
It's nice to meet everyone. Is Deep here? They have an appointment.
Good morning. Yes, Deep
Oh.
is here.
Fine people.
Yeah, so my name is Harrison Nance. I'm with the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, joined today by Megan Andrews. Our designee for the this working group is Brian Thompson, who's our Director of Land, Water, and Resources Division at DEEP, whom I'm sure many of you are familiar with, but he was unable to join today, so we're standing in and taking some notes for when he's able to participate in the next meeting. So appreciate being part of this and look forward to more conversation. Thank you.
Okay, and we have additional people online, if they could introduce themselves.
Good morning. My name is Peter Vasserman. I am here representing towns in excess of 15,000 population. I am an engineer by training, retired CEO. I am the chairman of Branford, Connecticut's Inland Wetland Watercourse Wetland and Watercourse Agency. Have been there for 10 years in that capacity, and we run into the balancing act between personal property rights and protection of the watercourse and wetland many times with the application. So I think this discussion should be very worthwhile to any commission in the state.
Thank you. Are there other people online who would like to introduce themselves?
Hi,
Bob.
good evening.
Go ahead, Liz.
Oh, hi, my name is Elizabeth Verna. I am from Wallingford, Connecticut. I've been a member of the Connecticut Home Builders Association for 30 years. I served as its past president and chair of government affairs. I built single-family homes in New Haven, Tolland, and Middlesex County. And I'm looking forward to hopefully contributing a common sense approach and balancing land use issues with riparian buffers.
Thank you, Liz.
I'm Bob Petzold. I represent the Connecticut Marine Trades Association. Obviously, any proposed legislation would significantly impact the 350 waterfront members that we have. So I'm happy to be on the committee here and anxious to see what we can get done.
Thank you. We have additional people online.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Matt Fitzpatrick. I'm representing the Connecticut Nursery and Landscape Association. Similar to Mr. Jeremiah, many of our members are nurseries within the state who may be impacted by any potential legislation. So we appreciate being included in this working group.
Representative Wyszynski, my name is Denise Savageau, and I'm the president of the Connecticut Association of Conservation District. And I also chair the Connecticut Council on Soil and Water Conservation, which is a state agency assigned to work with the districts. The districts are set up under state statute to provide technical assistance and outreach and education to farmers, local municipalities, and private landowners on all things related to soil and water conservation. And the work that our districts do focus on things like watershed health, soils, regenerative agriculture, farmland preservation, watershed planning and management, drinking water protection, stormwater management, wetlands and water courses. We provide services, particularly in this instance, to the watershed planning, working very closely with local inland wetland commissions, local conservation commissions, and local planning and zoning commissions. So we were been around since the Dust Bowl era, established in 1946, and we have 5 conservation districts across Connecticut. We will be here. I do have some alternates who are with me. Joanne Shapiro, Alicia Mojan, and Kelsey Sudal are here as alternates, here to listen, learn, but also provide technical assistance. One of the roles that the conservation districts play is serving sometimes as the local inland wetland agent for municipalities, again, providing technical assistance to them across the state. And a lot of our board members, including Alicia, are served or are recently retired from serving as local inland wetlands commissioners. So we have a lot of expertise in this field. We look forward to working with this task force. Thank you.
I'm Amy Petrus, Executive Director of the Farmington River Watershed Association, a nonprofit working since 1953 to protect the Farmington River through research, education, and advocacy. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Amy. John.
Hi. Oh, sorry. Hi, I'm Alicia Mosian, Denise's alternate. Like she said, I serve on the Kakiwik Board and the Southwest Conservation District. I worked in Westport for 37 years, 10 in planning and zoning and 27 in conservation, 22 of which I was a conservation director. And it was my goal, as others have said, to balance the need for environmental protection with the rights of property owners. And I think we were very successful at that, because every time we got sued, we always won, I think, because we had a balanced decision. Thank you for allowing me to participate.
That's a really good attribute to every time you won. Obviously, you know what you're doing. Do we have anybody else?
Yeah, good morning, Chairman Mashinsky. My name is John Guskowski. I am a planner and principal with Tyche Planning and Policy Group. I've been appointed to this working group because I am the government relations chair of the Connecticut chapter of the American Planning Association, a membership organization representing 400 local, regional, state planners and affiliated professionals. I have been the government relations chair for 10 years. I also happen to have a master's degree in watershed hydrology from UConn, so I have some familiarity with stormwater, river flow, and that sort of thing. And also for the past 20 plus years, I've chaired the nonprofit Connecticut Resource Conservation and Development Council, which is a community development and conservation nonprofit. And I'm very much looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Good morning, Mary. My name is Betsy Guerra. I'm the executive director of the Connecticut Waterworks Association, which is a trade association of municipal, regional, and private water utilities. I'll be serving as the alternate to William Henley from Regional Water Authority, who will be CWWA's designee. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to mention that in many instances, we have people filling in for other people when they cannot make the meetings. That's okay, as long as you're representing the group. You can send an alternate in here, because we are trying to represent everyone that has an interest in the issue. So, but let us know who it is so we can add them to the list. All right. The group is actually too large, but everyone, the folks that are here now wanted it to be on. And so we're trying to make the best of that, but it's difficult to make decisions with a group this big, so we will do our best. We completed all the folks that are here either in person or online. There are a couple guests here who are watching. If you'd like to introduce yourselves, you don't have to, but if you'd like to.
Sure. Francis Pickering, Executive Director, Western Connecticut Council of Governments, not a guest. Charles Vittich is there in my place because I could not make it today. As one of the 9 COG directors, our function is to provide land use review and technical assistance to our municipalities. And as Charles has mentioned, we have released a series of reports on water quality and quantity issues over the last 4 or 5 years. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joanna Shapiro. I'm the Executive Director of the North Central Conservation District. Denise already gave a great intro to the work of the conservation districts. In our district, we do a lot of work assisting our towns. We serve 30 towns, North Central Connecticut, and we serve as inland wetland agents in a couple of our small towns. So we see what works, what doesn't work, but at the same time, we do a lot of water quality projects. Mary Rickle-Pelletier mentioned our recent update of the North Branch Park River Watershed Plan. We also do a lot of implementation of water quality projects, including on farms. We're working on a large dairy farm project now. So we have a broad perspective of a lot of these relevant issues.
Any more online before we go to the folks in the room? Charles, do you want to start again? Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Charles Rothenberger, Director of Government Relations for Save the Sound, and I'll be serving as Bill Lucy's second/alternate. So thank you.
Good morning. My name is David Dickerson. I'm an analyst with OLR, the Office of Nonpartisan Research, and I staff environment and public safety.
Hello, I'm attorney Janet Brooks. I've worked in environmental law since 1981, 5 years at Connecticut Fund for the Environment, 18 years in the Attorney General's office, always doing environmental law. I facilitated the Wetlands Practice Group. I was at the beginning with doing the legal portions of training, and I'm always of wetlands commissioners, and I'm always looking at changes in the law that can be implemented, because there are many areas of the law that do not enjoy uniform application throughout the state. So I'm particularly interested in that. And when I testify, I'm the person who's saying, but on line 13, it doesn't reflect your purpose of whatever. So I'm both big picture about training and nitpicker about words.
Okay, on the other side, we have a couple guests. If you would like, you don't have to, but if you'd like to identify yourselves, just come up to the mic, okay?
Hi, Mike Smith, lobbyist at Rome Smith Kowalski. We have some clients on here, so thank you.
Brad Weeks, also with Rome Smith Kowalski. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to let my co-chair introduce our researcher.
So there is a OLR research, and this is for people may be watching, OLR research report, Wetlands Buffer Zones in New England, that was published September 11th. It's number 115, and we are fortunate to have the author here, David Dickerson. We're going to ask him to summarize it, if he can come up to the middle here. Thank you.
Good morning. As I said earlier, my name is David Dickerson. I am with the Office of Legislative Research, and I wrote the Wetlands Buffer Zones in New England report.
Can you get a little closer to the mic?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Is better. And while sorry, I was just thinking for a second. All of the surrounding states have laws regulating buffers in some capacity. I would encourage everybody to fully read the report to learn the context. The report was a brief overview of the regulations or laws concerning buffer zones generally. There's lots of exceptions and notice requirements and various other provisions in each of the states that are unique to their specific situations. Additional context would be needed to have any full understanding of the regulations or statutes, but I believe it is a relatively comprehensive overview of the surrounding states' provisions regarding buffer zones.
We appreciate your work, and we should have said ahead of time that we were going to call on you, so I apologize for that. But the question had come up earlier this summer. Is it true that everyone else in New England has buffer protection except for Connecticut? And that was why we asked you to write the report. I think you verified that that is true, that the other states do have some type, they're all different, but they have some type of wetland protection. And I don't know if you would like to.
When he's done.
Okay, are you set, David?
If you have no further questions.
Well, can you stay there?
Yes, I can stay at the desk.
You're free to talk the report more if you want in detail.
Rep. Dubinsky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did go through the report, and I didn't look at each of the underlying statutes. So just from the report, it's difficult for me to determine whether the regulations that are in the report are similar to Connecticut's upland review area regulations, or if they're different. So, Connecticut does have something, and I'm not sure from this report how they relate.
Sure. So the upland review areas is a term created by DEEP. I believe it is up to the towns to create them and set their own regulations for them. They're beyond the scope of the report. I just included a small sidebar concerning them. But the yes, I hope that answers your question.
Okay, so the regulations in each of these other states, are they similar to our upland review area regulations, except that they are statewide as opposed to townwide?
My understanding is that the DEEP put out a guidance document in 1996, I believe. It might have been 1997, which influences the regulations that are adopted by the towns. I couldn't say because I have not reviewed each town's or whether there is a commonality between the various towns enough to say whether or not they are similar to all of the surrounding states or not.
Okay, so that analysis as to whether or not Connecticut has something similar to these other states was not part of your report.
The report was focused on what the surrounding states' regulations concerning buffer zones were.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Sharma.
So
I had a question.
I mean, in just just having where all of these things live is extremely helpful to be able to go in. And I have looked at a lot of the other states, and I think there is certainly an opportunity to also bring in some of that context. For example, Maine has a very interesting, and it's not reflected here because this is more of a general overview. Maine has a definition for working waterfront activity, which I'm sure Mr. Petzold would be interested in hearing about. So there are a lot of other really great examples from other states, and Rivers Alliance, and I'm sure Charles would also be happy to bring in some of this context. But I think it's really hard to compare what Connecticut does to other states because the approaches are very different. Connecticut uses sort of the this is what you can do approach. And Massachusetts seems to have a very long list of these are the things you can't do approach. So it's hard to compare the two, but I think what's really important is looking at the protection of vegetation specifically. And for Massachusetts, that lies within their regulations. Vegetation is mentioned dozens of times in their regulations. Connecticut has the Inland Wetlands Act, and we don't have those companion regulations like other states do. We have, as he mentioned, the guidance that goes to the towns that implement this. Massachusetts is similar in that they have their local conservation commissions that administrate the laws and regulations similar to Connecticut. They just sort of do it sort of almost in the opposite way as far as how it's regulated and how the law works.
Those online, you can use the raise your hand function or.
I don't know where it is. So I have a question, Liz Verna from the Connecticut Home Builders. Is this group trying to determine if this will fall under municipal jurisdiction or state jurisdiction? Who will be regulating this in the end? Are we trying to take it away from the municipalities?
We're trying to set up, hopefully a law that covers a minimal protection for riparian buffers. We don't have a statewide minimal protection at the moment, but the other states do.
But still to be regulated by the towns.
Yeah, the town would actually do the on the ground enforcement.
Okay.
But we believe, or at least some of us believe that on this group that we need to have a state minimum as well. And we have a question.
This is Peter Basserman. I have a question for Mr. Dickerson. Was in part of the review, was there any review done of court cases that may have challenged the riparian regulations in the other states? Was that part of the review or not?
No, I did not review court cases. As an addendum, the Office of Legislative Research is not allowed to give legal opinions.
Thank you.
Frank?
Yes, good morning. I hope that my experience in wetlands and planning and zoning and so forth can be of value to the commission. So there's a couple things I noticed in looking at what you sent over. The first is, did you note that while these other states have these regulations, in some cases it's part of an inland wetland regulation, and in other cases it is a standalone regulation? There are actually like river protection acts and inland wetland acts. Now, some states have combined the two and some have them separate. So I'm wondering if you've looked at that and if you've done any assessment as to the benefit of each.
The Office of Legislative Research is not allowed to give opinions on policy. So whether or not something is better or worse than another thing is not generally something that our office does. As I said earlier, my review of the surrounding states was the report is fairly general. So I believe the contents of the report are accurate.
If I might ask one other question, and that is, in your report, it doesn't clarify the basis that's used for inland wetland. In other words, Connecticut uses a soils-based analysis on the inland wetlands. Titles a little differently, but for inland wetlands, it's strictly soils-based. And I believe we are the only state in New England that does that, and perhaps the only state in the United States that does that.
The soil typing was not a portion of the report. And while I have defined certain states' protections inside of the report, Connecticut's role in Connecticut's regulations was not one of the main purposes of the report.
Thank you.
You did exactly what we asked you to do, and we appreciate it. It's a very good report. Alan, you had a comment?
Yes, so our organization, the Connecticut Association of Conservation and Inland Wetland Commissions, or CACIWC, the acronym, we asked Attorney Brooks several years ago to do an analysis and a summary of some of these laws, both in the area, but also in towns within Connecticut. And if the co-chairs would permit it, Janet would be happy to give just a few minutes summary of that, just to answer some of these questions.
Do you want to do it now? Sure. Okay, we have time, Janet, if you're prepared to make the comments.
In 2013, I undertook an examination of the municipal regulations that were available. I started first online. I worked with an intern, and I eventually, through emails, websites, and telephone calls, was able to be in touch with 85% of the wetlands commissions. So there were 8 unresponsive towns. And of that 85%, 80% have adopted a 100-foot upland review area. So that's probably 60, 75% of the state has an 100-foot upland review area. Two towns have no upland review area whatsoever. And of course, then the biggest landowner with no upland review area is the state of Connecticut. And Deep has something like over their dead body would they ever adopt an upland review area. So that's what that is. My question about the report is, when you look at buffer areas in Connecticut, we've been trying to be careful to only use buffer when we mean no activity, as opposed to an upland review area, which is activity. But I'm not sure that there's other states in New England use buffer that way, because I think they also then say, and here's our buffer area, and then here are all these things you're allowed to do in it. So the difference between an upland review area and a buffer area may not be that great, and we'd have to like really get into the specifics and compare and contrast. So
It's really going to be up to us, I think, how we break this.
Or actually, as of 2013, there were 5 municipal wetlands agencies that had vegetated buffer regulations on the books. And I actually last year, before the CACIWC meeting, updated those 5 towns still have it, but I did not undertake 169 town review of the other ones if there's been any increase. And they're all over the place too, of how they do that and whether there are exceptions to it, et cetera. But that might be an area of interest to see what is being used, how much it's working, et cetera.
Thank you. I think we had some others who had remarks. Yes, sir.
Following up on Janet Brooks' comments, actually in 2022, we did a review of the 169 municipalities. We didn't skip any. We actually got all of them. Of course, we were in the digital age at that point, but even when we had to get hard copies, we did. So generally speaking, what Janet said is right. But there's a wide range from 0 upland review area to 300 feet upland review areas. And I should say that the upland review area concept also is not just a question of looking at wetlands and watercourses, but there have been a goodly number of them who are looking at other areas, which has to do with other types of water bodies, for example. So, which are distinctly different than just a pure upland review area. So we have, in this particular study, included that kind of information. We've done that exhaustive analysis, but I should say, independent of that, to the point of what's going on at the New England level, and of course we did the national level as well. The New England level, you have different approaches. You have the conservation commissions that handle it in Massachusetts under a separate law from the inland wetland law, but governed by the conservation commissions. It's a key point, separate law. Rhode Island took the authority away from the municipalities and is run now by the state as of 2022 or so. They had about a 4 or 5 year hearing process to develop that. Then you go up to Maine, they have a one size fits all. It's a zoning approach. Everyone has to adopt a standard template. Now you go to the approach taken in Vermont, which is at municipal level, but with a state enacted system of managing those regulations, which is based on a hydrologic approach to the regulations, because it's dealing with fluvial geomorphology, if you like that word, because that's basically dealing with the flooding issues that they had. So they're very closely connected between flooding and fluvial geomorphology as a driver, but municipally run by an enabling act. In New Hampshire, it's also an enabling act, but it's also delegated to the zoning commissions as well. So you have different approaches between zoning, which is done in most of the towns, most of the New England, except for Rhode Island, which is run now by the state. They decided there was too much going on in Rhode Island at the municipal level that was incrementally destroying the process by too much negotiation, which is to a large extent one of the challenges we face with the upland review area, because we did an extensive study even more recently of what went on during the COVID period and the amount of compromise of land within the upland review area, because it's not a protected area, it's a regulated area and arguably very limitedly regulated. And so we had an enormous number of gazebos, fire pits and what have you being built during the COVID period through an analysis we did. And the result is because there is no upland review area regulation in Connecticut, it was a lower level staff person of the Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection at the time that wrote this memo. And that is all that we have. So it'd be like me at a lower level writing a memo and say, you will all now have this guidance. Well, anybody can write the memo. So we do not have, we're the only New England state without it. And we're one of 9 states in the United States that does not have these kind of protections. So I encourage you to read the study we wrote, because it is really the extensive and exhaustive study on all the issues you've been just hearing about. This particular study is online at the Westcog website, and I highly encourage you to do this. I spent 30 years in this field, so I've been involved with statutory and regulatory issues in my national role for many years. So this is not a new thing for me to do. And I highly encourage you to look at this report to get the what's really happening perspective.
Are you able to work with our clerk, Mr. Larkin, to have that distributed to the members?
It's online.
Okay, but we have to link up.
Yes, Brett Mashinsky, I'll find it and send it around to the
Okay, I think
members.
that would be helpful because it sounds like it's even more.
It is the definitive study of what's going on in New England.
Yeah.
There are studies that have been done. New Hampshire has done a study that shows what's going on in the literature, but it's not an exhaustive study of the regulatory and the statutory, because those are 2 different levels of this analysis that you need to look at. And then there is the actual practical. In our study, we actually looked at every single town in all of New England. Fortunately, that some of that work was already done. And it is in our study, and it shows what the extent of the adoption that has occurred, even in the enabling provisions of Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. So it gives you a real picture, not only at the state level, but it gives you an understanding at the municipal level, who's actually doing what, because this is a work in progress.
Will Casey be our point of contact for all literature review items? I think it would be a good idea to have a list of sort of literature review in all one place. It would be helpful.
As people gather material, we can direct it to our clerk and then he can distribute it. But it is a good idea if there are complete reports or projects done that others need to see to make this decision. It's a good idea to have Mr. Larkin have it.
Yes, and I put together a 6-page reference document of all the literature that relates to this, which I can make available as well. And that is probably more than you want to look at, but you can pick out a few of them that by their title go to the nitty-gritty of this.
Yeah, there is some crossover between inland wetlands and planning and zoning for this particular issue. And
Yes.
we are going to have to decide where we put it, how big is it, and so on.
Exactly.
Mary?
I would just like to make a suggestion, and admittedly, I come from I'm an urbanist. I come from a design perspective, not a legal perspective. But what's missing, when I look at what's happened to the Park River Regional Watershed, the watershed named after the first public park paid by public funds, which buried the Park River under I-84, is death by 1,000 cuts, right? Is that each piece of the nature of the city has been lost by some decision made. And what's really missing is guidance on what is a healthy watershed, what is a healthy relationship between nature and the city. And so in addition to maybe establishing these minimums, which are often brushed aside or overlooked, is there a bigger picture that, there's these, and I don't know the terms, but if there's cap and trade, is there some way to look at maybe the whole watershed or the sub watershed and begin to say, how do we, if someone's going to overbuild, they have to pay a fee to others, right? If they really want to build in the wetland and get a permit for that, rather than one permit, another permit, another permit. And so anyway, that's a thought, is how do we establish, instead of these approaches that are what not to do, or what you can do, what you can't do, what is a healthy river, and then begin to draw a loss around that. So, and that may be idealistic, but I think it's needed.
Thank you, Mary. And Mary's on because she called and said, you forgot the big city rivers, and we did. So that's why you're on. So thank you
Everybody's
for
going to be
speaking
a
up
big
for
city river someday. You could all be like Hartford someday. Just keep that in mind. And that's, yeah.
Thank you. Alicia?
I think just to follow up on what Mary was saying, I think we can all agree on a few things. I think it's a good idea to sort of put a finer point on what we're trying to do here. I think we can all agree that what we really want to do here is to find a way to protect those vegetated strips along our waterways. And there is a distinction in Connecticut statutes between wetlands and watercourses. So, those vegetated strips along our watercourses are a priority. And focusing on watercourses, and also finding a way to give the local commissions the tools they need to be able to do that. And I think that and we have good examples of that already in Connecticut with the Gateway Commission. We also have good examples with our wild and scenic rivers. These areas are not no-touch areas, but they are similar in a way with the upland review area where that certain activities are regulated and, similar to the way Maine does it with Gateway Commission and with our wild and scenic areas, the removal of that vegetation is regulated and not necessarily outwardly prohibited. And so there is that. We do have good examples of that balance that have worked for years, that have actually maintained property values and enjoyment of our waterways because it has it has sort of preserved that aesthetic value on our waterways. And so I think if we can agree that, we don't want to rewrite the Wetlands Act, but working within what we have, and I think it's really important to hear from our local commissions as to what would work for them. How can they do this in a way that can be implemented?
Alicia, question. The special act, talks about riparian, but then in the section 1, recommendations to inland wetlands watercourse regulations, but are you saying you think this group should focus on riverbanks versus beyond? What I'm saying is where those vegetated strips are most needed is along our water courses, because it definitely gets a lot more complicated, as Representative Dubitsky said during the last legislative session. If we're looking at our wetlands, well, because we determine our wetlands by soils, that definitely gets tricky, and our wetlands should be preserved in general because they have a lot of those functions that those vegetated strips, actually the ecosystem services they provide. What I am saying is, yes, the biggest bang for our buck is going to be when we're looking at, limiting erosion where we're going to have property loss along our waterways, limiting pollution to the point where we can't use our lakes and ponds when we're looking at things like blue-green algae. Having those vegetated strips are going to be the most economical way we can do that, and it needs to be focused on water courses. That is where it's going to be most effective.
I'd just like to weigh in on this question because this is specifically critical to urban areas where many wetlands have already been paved over. They were paved over before 1974 in Hartford. And so what's interesting about the North Branch is the forests on the steep slopes that have been overlooked, but they're unprotected. And those forests are actually helping to cool the stream corridors and cool the neighborhood. So it's the forests that are on the steep slopes that are actually the most valuable pieces of land along the North Branch of the Park River, and they're reducing the heat vulnerability of our neighborhoods considerably. This is the data from the North Branch Park River Watershed Management Plan. And the other thing about the forest on the steep slopes is because of the water availability, these serious droughts that we're having now, those forests, those trees have available water on the stream corridors. So it's particularly important for the climate change to preserve the forests that are on the steep slopes. And that may not be a quote unquote wetland.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to comment momentarily on the use of the word minimum. I understand its use as a reference, as an objective from a state perspective, that they want to identify minimum protective distances or something like that, such that the riparian areas are protected as a whole. However, I encourage the group to think of the word minimum as minimum applying in different circumstances. As an obvious example, I'll give you, you certainly are going to want a different minimum protective area surrounding a tributary to a water supply reservoir, or to a high value trout stream than you would to some other. And I think parsing out those minimums is going to be one of the more difficult tasks as we go along of this group. But just avoid thinking of a minimum as just a single unit. Think of it in reference to the function of those streams within our ecosystems and the value of those streams to our communities.
Yeah, and that came up in the classification of streams by deep as well. The distances would change based on what the purpose of that river is, highest purpose.
Yeah, if I can just follow up on that point, that's exactly what Massachusetts did with their conservation commissions. They have two standards. One is for the urban area, Greater Boston, which is like a 25-foot zone around the Charles River, for example. And then the rest of the state of Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which is a more restrictive standard because it's more rural. So that's an example of what Bill Hyatt has just been saying. Bill, Lucy.
Yeah, and I think maybe backing up a little bit to scope out why we really need to do this, I think it would be important to add the 303D list to the list of references, because there's hundreds of miles of streams that are compromised and don't support aquatic life, or there's bacteria, but most of it is stormwater derived. That's a big problem that we have with the health of our streams. And what that turns into is if you go to the Connecticut Geodata portal and you can look at the impaired list, and there's one tab for estuaries, Long Island Sound, and they're broken into sections. And the majority of our estuary is listed as impaired. And that's because of the condition of the watershed. So I just wanted to back up. We have a bad problem and we need to fix it. And so I think that's why we're all at the table. It's a critical situation. And so I'm really happy to see this happening, and I hope we move forward fairly quickly.
Can you send the link to our clerk, Mr. Larkin?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Rep. Dubinsky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 2 points. First off, when we talk about leaving a buffer zone vegetated, we need to remember that in many places, there is no vegetative buffer zone now. So what we would be doing is we would be forcing the landowner to stop using the land that they're currently using. So that could be, there could be a farm road that goes right past the pond. Well, if you put in 100-foot buffer zone there, they can no longer use that road. There may not be any other place to put that farm road to get to their other fields. So it's not like every wetland and watercourse in the state is out in the middle of the woods and we're just going to try to keep that vegetative area around it from being used. They're currently being used. And anything we do that says you can't use it is pushing the landowner off of the land in those areas. The other thing is, to Alicia's point, I think it's very important to think differently about water courses, particularly rivers and ponds and things like that, and wetlands. At one point, there was a concept of essentially putting a pin in every wetland in the state and drawing 100-foot circle around it and saying you can't do anything in that area. Many farms have wetlands all over them. And if you prevent any activity within 100 feet of every wetland, you could be destroying a lot of farms and a lot of other types of activities as well. So I do think it's important to look at those two things differently. You know, the major rivers, major lakes and ponds, those are very different than some area that doesn't dry up in a farmer's field. We need to treat them differently.
Our Inland Wetlands and Water Act already separates wetlands, and there are two different definitions. So that already exists. And I will say there is nothing we're talking about that's going to prohibit a farmer from having a road, but I don't think it's smart for a farmer to have a road a foot from a stream that's going to flood. It doesn't make sense, but we aren't talking about prohibiting anything like that.
We had Joan and then Frank. Joan?
Yeah, as I'm listening to this conversation, I'm thinking of myself out in the woods. So I agree with I think the direction we're headed is to look at water courses versus wetlands from a practical perspective. From a forestry perspective, we all understand, to your point, how critical a healthy forest is to protecting these riparian waterways and the water quality. So I just want to make sure, and I'm getting a little ahead of the conversation here, but I also want to make sure that keeping our forests healthy along these riparian areas, and sometimes that requires some sort of forestry intervention, is going to be considered when we develop anything. As a forester that's been doing this for 40 years, as I said to Commissioner Katie Dykes a year or so ago, I have never seen more pressure on the health of our forests than I've seen in the last 8 years. And this is not the time to think about locking up areas that cannot be managed when we have so many forest health problems. So I'm committed to making sure we get this right, but we want to keep our forests healthy so we can protect the water quality.
This is exactly why you were appointed.
Thank you.
You have a reputation as being a practical person who is trying to do several things at once, and I think you just said it. That's why you're here. So,
and I have my boots on, so I'm going out in the woods after this. Thank you.
All right, Frank.
Yes, so the situation is kind of like this. The state of Connecticut has empowered the Inland Wetlands and Water Courses Agency to oversee these water courses. And so now you have to decide if you're going to separate that out or incorporate it in. If you separate it out, it's almost as if you're taking the water courses part of it out of the agency and doing it separately, and you can do that. Or you can incorporate buffers and that sort of thing, but it's almost like comparing apples and oranges. And this was in my testimony, I put this forth the last few years. Wetlands are determined by soils in Connecticut, inland wetlands are, by a soil scientist. Whereas a riparian area, you need to define what that edge is in order to know where you're going to work from. Are you 5 feet, 10 feet, but where is that from? And the problem is when you try to incorporate the language of the riparian protections into inland wetlands protections, you end up with this really confusing area because it's almost, and what happened in the last writing was that it ended up being based on upland review areas, on wetland areas, and really that has got to be separated out one way or the other. You can take the riparian distances and put them in cleanly into the current inland wetlands and water courses regulations, and what those look like we can all go back and forth on, whether it's 5 feet, it's 10 feet, it's their exemptions and all that. Or you can set it up as a separate entity, a separate regulation, and you can then decide who enforces it. Is it the Inland Wetlands and Water Courses Agency? They do this, but it's a separate regulation, or is it in fact something we're going to try to put into the Inland Wetlands and Water Courses Agency regulations, but have them be very clean so that they're not referring back to something else? And I think that's one of the discussions that we have to have before we decide what it looks like. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, so following up on what Frank said, and also Alicia referred to, I think all of our members, including Durham, really agreed that by definition, riparian should be limited to water courses. One of the earlier versions of 7174, as you mentioned, did confuse the issue by talking about wetland systems. And as Representative Dubinsky said, this was really going away from, I think, the original intent of what we're trying to do. So I think if we do nothing else today, we as a working group should really agree that we should focus on water courses as defined by riparian.
Yes, I agree with that. And basically, that's what Massachusetts did. They recognized that, and the delegation, it turns out, did go to the conservation commissions, but they're not necessarily have to go that way. But the separation does make sense. Otherwise, it's really a crazy quilt of issues that emerge, and that's the clean way of doing it.
And then we know there are a small number of towns that don't do anything on riparian. And so if we had a statewide law, if we could write one, everyone would at least do the minimum.
Yeah.
And some will do more.
Yeah, I mean, Sanford doesn't have one, for example, on Upland Review area. And of course, there are others that have been decided by judicial decision, by the way. We have some that have appeared that way, which were not even decided locally, without mentioning names. So it really does make sense to separate them out. The issue of whether zoning should be responsible, inland wetlands should be responsible. The delegation issue, I think, is a discussion item now.
Lisa had her hand up.
I think it's important that everyone read the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Act. And I think it's really important to understand that every statute that we have has definitions for a reason. And every little word that in a statute and regulations apply to certain things and refer back to those definitions. And the definitions of wetlands and watercourses are separate within our Inland Wetlands Act. So I just want to make that very clear. We're not talking about completely upending everything we're doing and taking anything away from the inland wetlands agencies. They're the ones that administer our Inland Wetlands Act. And like I said, we need to make sure that they have the tools to be able to protect these vegetated strips.
There's sort of a consensus developing here on one thing, which is we're going to concentrate on rivers and streams, correct? Am I hearing that? Okay. All right, so we made it. We made a decision. Yay.
Yes, if I just want to say rivers and streams, but understanding that there's many orders of rivers and streams, from headwaters all the way down to first order streams that going right into the sound. So understanding that it's not one size fits all, and that has to be thought through.
Especially with respect to non-navigable streams, which are not overlooked in the federal regulations, So I wanted to follow up on Representative Dubinsky's point about the existing uses, because of course, most of the North Branch is existing uses, but also issues related to farmland. I do have friends who have considerable farmland along the Connecticut River and the floodplains. And one of the things is they have, they had leased out some of this land to a farmer who was who had corn, and it was obvious that the corn was being sprayed with pesticides. It was probably GMO corn. There was no insects in this. And thankfully, they've switched their farmers who they're leasing it to. But that's an example of how they don't have to stop using the land as farmland, but they could be encouraged or incentivized in some way to stop using pesticides or GMO corn in the floodplain, right? So that's an example of, I wouldn't take away uses, but I think that we can all improve. We can all do a little better. And then with respect to our cities, these derelict parking lots are held on to property owners, including the state of Connecticut. And they use them to, I think, to leverage for funding or funds, and they're completely useless, and they're eyesores in our neighborhoods. In West Hartford, that was the case. And then those derelict parking lots are used to flip the land and bury that whole wetland these wetland areas in our neighborhoods for big developments when the neighbors had been hoping for restoration. So there's ways, maybe not in the law, but there's ways in this process to come up with incentives for the restoration of the healthy streams.
Rip Dubitsky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I absolutely agree. There are ways that we could all do better. But, for those who are not familiar with essentially how this working group got established initially, it's because there were proposals in the last legislative session to do a mandatory one-size-fits-all riparian area across, and there were differences of opinion as to the interpretation, but one interpretation is that it essentially created a no-go zone around every wetland and watercourse in the state. This working group was established to come up with a better way. And because that one size fits all in every single instance across the entire state just doesn't make sense. So absolutely, there are many different ways that we could come up with a better way. And this discussion is fantastic to come up with some of those ways. Not all of them are appropriate for legislation. In some instances, perhaps with regard to the farmers that are spraying right next to the Connecticut River, perhaps that's a Department of Agriculture incentive program to do something different. It doesn't necessarily have to be statewide legislation. So, I'm getting a lot from hearing everybody's opinion on how to protect, but let's remember that the initial proposal, at least one interpretation, was this mandatory no-go zone on not only every stream and river and pond, but every place that the soil said this is a wetland. 100-foot no-go zone around it. And for the people I represent, that ain't going to work.
I think we're interested in vegetation around the rivers in particular. That's what our focus is. Bill?
Yeah, I think we're hearing another consensus item, which would be 2 on the first day, which would be impressive. So for example, in the forestry realm, unfortunately, my experience comes from Alaska, not exactly applicable here with the hardwood forest, but the Forest Service had 300-foot riparian management zones saying wind-prone areas. They had 100-foot zone for making sure wood was falling into the rivers to create fish habitat and buffered shade. The state had a 66-foot old school one chain distance. So there was a number of different methods to get at that vegetated buffer. And I think Francis brought it up, and if you're in the middle of a town, are you going to get 10 feet or 25 feet? So are we all kind of in agreement that this is not going to be a one size fits all? So we could lay that to rest?
Definitely.
Sorry, to jump in here. I hate to provide a somewhat dissenting voice, but I would be remiss in not stating that, well, I feel there certainly should not be just a cookie cutter, one size fits all approach, and that would not work in our state. I do think it's a mistake to totally ignore wetlands in this conversation, where the comment of all these structures put in upland review areas. I feel that the way our current wetland statute is written, inland wetland commissions do not have tools to prevent incremental encroachment in these upland review areas. The way the statute's written, there's no recognition of the value of these riparian areas and a vegetated area between a wetland and an upland. And there's plenty of science to back up that these riparian vegetated areas do have tremendous value, but wetland commissions really, based on case law, cannot consider impacts to those upland review areas unless there's a chemical, physical adverse impact that we can prove will occur in the wetland itself, in the chemistry of the wetland. Wetland commissions are not allowed to consider any of the important salamanders and anything else other than the wetland chemistry itself. And while I agree a one size fits all approach would not work, I do think that there could be, where we do have the separate definitions of wetlands and water courses, there could be some improvement at least made to the statute to where the commissions would have some tools. There'd still be exemptions for ag. I don't think anyone is advocating for requiring farmers to abandon use of currently used riparian areas or to suddenly forest areas that have been unforested for a long time, but going forward to preserve what we have as best we can. And again, not with one size fits all, but to at least have some language in there to allow commissions to consider impacts to buffer areas, both to wetlands and water courses. I agree the rivers and streams are the cleanest, kind of low hanging fruit and a very important one. But if we're looking at possibly modifying the wetland statute, I think we'd be remiss in not at least looking into what we can do, some meaningful change for wetlands as well.
Okay, maybe to paraphrase, it looks like most of the folks want to start with protection of rivers and streams. And then we could consider yours as an additional recommendation and bat it around here for a while. But I think what most people here are saying, if I'm hearing it correctly, is that you want to start with rivers and streams, correct? Okay. So we haven't forgotten the other question, but I think we're going to start with the one we may have consensus on.
Mary? Hi.
Hi.
Representative Mishinsky, I'm sorry for being informal. This is Liz Verna from the Connecticut Home Builders Association. The Inland Wetlands and Watercourse Act, we may want to look at the definitions of watercourse and the definition of wetlands. I think it will clarify a lot of things for everyone in this group if we take a look at what the definitions are. Is anyone opposed to doing that?
It's our next meeting agenda, actually.
Oh, it is. Oh, okay.
You don't have my crib sheet with as the
No, I don't have it.
I
think
I
a
will send
review
that
of the
around.
a review of the Inland Wetlands Act would be definitely appropriate.
Yeah, that's on the 22nd. We will
Okay.
look at that, and also deep resources to assist with all of this. So we will get to it, Liz. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. So that is actually an intelligent and maybe a very elegant way to address this, is to look at the definition of watercourses in the current statute. The other thing, in doing my research for this and the experience that I've got in dealing with the wetlands issues that we run across, I think that it would be helpful to construct a list of the things that we can imagine would need these exceptions. And I'll start with agriculture. That's always a big one, but also driveways. In fact, when I look at some of these other statutes that are written to protect riparian areas, In some of the other states, they actually exclude driveways. If you have a driveway, it's next to the riparian area, you can still maintain that driveway. Access docks for boaters and marinas, you know, they're going to need that clear access. They can't have vegetation in the way. The other thing is sidewalks, industry. The Connecticut has a lot of industry that's located on a waterway, on a river, intentionally, and they need to keep that area clean. They cannot have vegetation there. Utilities, the utilities, other than maybe water, but utilities need to be able to manage vegetation efficiently so that that doesn't interfere with their operations. Security fencing. There are places that need security fencing. These places may be located near the water. They need to be able to install it, and obviously they don't want everything growing up through it. Fire ponds and fire protection. And finally, water views. I mean, there's a lot of people that have homes on the Connecticut River. They paid a premium for those homes so that they could have a water view. And I think we have to balance that somehow. It's a tough one, but I think those are some of the exemptions that we have to consider when we look at whatever way we do this. Thank you.
Mr. DeFelice, those already exist in the Act, those exemptions. Almost everyone you just mentioned, except for water views.
Yes, in the current Inland Wetlands and Water Courses Act, that is correct. That the agencies have discretion to manage those things. What we do should not negate that.
No, there are already exemptions. There are exemptions within the Inland Wetlands and Water Courses Act.
That's correct.
Yes.
But what we do may change that, and we don't want to affect that balance. If we can maintain those exemptions, that's great.
I'm just speaking for myself. I'm not. If we have continued loss of riparian protection in terms of vegetation, I am interested in changing that, because we can't keep losing the edges of the river and stream. Or otherwise our water quality will degrade. The water will warm up. Some of our fish will disappear. Long Island Sound will be polluted. So status quo for me is not acceptable, but I'm just speaking for myself. I think we have, new information as the issue is studied, we learn that the streams that have a fringe of vegetation along them are in better condition. And so we're trying to protect that for the other uses of rivers and streams that were brought up here. Joan.
Yes, thank you. So again, adding to that list, I just want to make sure that forestry is included. I know it is in the permitted use of right language, but I just want to, tree cutting sometimes gets a bad reputation, but sometimes we have to do tree cutting for forest health reasons. I just want to make sure we recognize that. I'll also just say, and somebody mentioned something about existing real estate. I'll just use that term along rivers. I'll just share an experience. I always wanted to kayak up the Lieutenant River. So few years ago, I kayaked up the Lieutenant River, which is in Lyme. And I was appalled at the amount of land that had been completely cleared right down to the edge of the Lieutenant River, so that a person that built a really big, expensive house had a view of the river. And I get protecting private property rights, but as somebody with an environmental background, really, like right down to the river, you couldn't have left something. And they put this massive lawn in, and guaranteed it's got all kinds of stuff to keep it green. So I think we have to be a little bit careful about existing real estate when it really is compromising water quality in our streams.
Alicia. And then we're going to Mr.
And
Petzel,
we have
who's
a
been
lot of
patient.
examples of other places that do that very well, like Maine.
Okay, Mr. Petzold online.
Thank you. Good morning. Obviously, I represent the marine industry, so obviously direct waterfront access is imperative to our membership. along the rivers, lakes, in Connecticut shoreline. So, you know, when we talk about exemptions and exceptions, I think we have to just bear that in mind, that we do need direct waterfront access. I think we're highly regulated. I could go through the regulations that were required at this point, but your eyes would probably roll in front of your head. But obviously, if you look at the marine industry, we don't make a living unless our waters are clean. So we are committed to having clean waterfront and doing whatever we need necessary. But again, just understand that we do need direct waterfront access.
Actually, that was a perfect segue because I was going to mention, in the cities.
Mary, can you put your hand up and then I will recognize you?
I'm sorry.
It just keeps it from being chaotic with this big group. Go ahead, Mary.
So that was a nice segue because I was going to mention, in the cities, everything converges. Hartford's only 18 square miles, but we do need boathouses and there is this complication between allowing proximity and public access, which usually means pavement in some sort or a viewing area, and then healthy forests, right? And so again, I wonder, is there any precedent in the state laws that were studied that there's this that there's some kind of give and take? And I use the phrase cap and trade because that's used in the carbon world, but is there any precedent for that sort of flexibility of language or laws?
Well, one thing, if I can say,
Carly,
the issue of imperviousness is a key broker of these issues. Whether you have land which needs to be open for a marina, there are ways of using pervious cover which accomplishes the same objectives that a marina may have. And of course, there's a whole set of technologies and practices that now exist to try to balance those perspectives. And I highly encourage the review of the pervious cover and impervious cover issue. There's a lot of scientific evidence as to where that issue affects water quality, flooding, and that does not, it turns out to be the pathway to resolve that issue in terms of how pervious cover standards are being done. We have in our state 13 municipalities that have already developed low impact development guidebooks, which focus on the low impact development focus. And I should also mention that our 2024 Stormwater Quality Manual for the state of Connecticut now makes low impact development the first step in the management of stormwater. So we really do need to look at that as the way to resolve some of those issues.
Yeah, this is a question that goes back to our discussion of a little while ago on exemptions. And I'm wondering if just somebody in the room could refresh my memory on how the current law differentiates between exemptions as they apply to existing uses versus exemptions and how they might apply to future uses, future development. Is there such a distinction and where does it lie in the current law? Thank you.
Could we, we have our expert right here, we can ask her, but we also can do that longer discussion of it at our next meeting on the 22nd. But do you want to briefly answer his question, Janet?
Sure. The state wetland statute makes no distinction between current use or future use. Federal wetlands law has a requirement about farming being already in existence. There's no difference between existing farms or future farms. The exemption is available to people in the future, even if they're not using it now.
Just a quick follow-up, but going forward as part of this process, we're not locked into that that uniform approach. Am I thinking of this correctly?
Well, Janet said that's current law. I mean, we can certainly tweak a current law if we want to do that and propose it as a change. But that'll be more. We have. Okay. Joanna Shapiro has her hand up.
Hi, yeah, I just want to jump in to clarify the current statute. What is regulated are activities in wetlands and water courses and in upland review areas. So if there's an existing farm that's been farming continuously and nothing's interrupted by that under current law, it's only if they're proposing a new activity that the commission reviews and determines if it's exempt or not. So I think that's why I sort of from the beginning of the conversation, I was already having that mindset of current practices most likely wouldn't be impacted unless we were to open that up. But it's only new activities that are currently regulated by our statute. And then just to Mary's point and the points about impervious cover, there's also currently the Capital Region Council of Governments is studying stormwater utility feasibility, which could really be effective, hopefully, in incentivizing pervious cover instead of impervious cover.
I know that the COGS calculated that natural vegetation was actually cheaper for towns to handle their stormwater issue than expensive construction. And you costed it out, as I recall. So that's good information to have. We have Liz Verna has her hand up.
I'm sorry, I keep on interrupting. Liz Verna from the Home Builders Association. I just would like to respectfully say, and this may be very unpopular in this group, I definitely feel like a minority, but Mary knows that I am a supporter of the environment and affordable housing. But we do also have to keep in mind that there should be a balance when we look at these things. We all live in homes, we all drive on roads. We all work in office buildings, we shop at stores. So anything that we decide, if we become too restrictive, how will that impact development in this state? And I just would like everyone to be mindful of that and look at this. Yes, let's protect what's important, but let's be mindful that we live here also and that we have to worry about the economic impacts of any decisions we make.
Thank you, Liz. So everybody's talked out? Nope. Bill Lucy.
Just following up on the impervious cover component and maybe throwing an idea out there for a future meeting about incentives under the state stormwater general permit. We're supposed to be reducing our impervious cover by 2% a year. And that's in state statute. And I'm just wondering, to Bill's point about future development or to the trades association where you have to have something on the water. Where I have my boat, they have a very advanced stormwater collection system, Cedar Island Marina in Clinton, and they did it before there was any regulations requiring it. So there are ways to do it, understanding it adds to costs. But if we're going to do the costs benefit analysis, we have to bring in clean water. We have to bring in the shellfish industry. We have to bring in people who want to hunt and fish. So there's a number of other users besides just, building more houses. I understand that's important. We all live in houses, but we could do it in a really sustainable way that we're gaining ground instead of death by 1,000 paper cuts. So I think, the MS4 incentive program, if there's a way that this riparian regulation goes into effect where the towns and municipalities get credit for doing something for their detached or stormwater, detaching the impervious cover. Thank you.
if we put them all in this group, it's gonna, we're gonna have to be in the House chamber because the group's gonna be too big. Charlie,
I just want to follow up on Bill Lucy's comment. I think it's an excellent one, particularly if there could be incentives that come out of this process for all the towns that are dealing with the MS4 program. And believe me, they don't have a lot of expertise, nor do they have a lot of resources or time to do that MS4 program. And so anything that comes out of this that would help that process would be hugely helpful. I know in Western Connecticut, our towns are just barely doing it. And so our council of governments is actually stepping in to try to help them with this work. And anything that happened through this process would be a godsend to our municipalities on that MS4 program, that is.
thank you. Joe, who's been very quiet so far.
Thank you. I enjoyed hearing about the exemptions that agriculture has right now, and the fact that most people seem to agree that they're important. I just want to speak a little bit about that. You're looking at other states, which it only makes sense to do that. The difference between Connecticut and, let's say, Massachusetts with its large land masses, or Maine, are 5,000 farms. A lot of them have areas that are 200 feet wide, even narrower, 300 foot at max. They're very, very small parcel land. So it's very important that we not only have exemptions, but keep what's on the books for exemptions so that we can maintain our businesses, because there are businesses, and at times they're going to need to grow in order to serve the public.
If you had to keep the last 25 feet between you and the river unplowed, could you do that?
On my part, we actually maintain thousands of feet of riparian area on our farms. We do that voluntarily.
Okay.
I just can't speak for every farmer in the state of Connecticut. And I think they need a voice here, because we're taught most riparian areas, let's be honest, are on farms. But we all enjoy the river. We all need water. Without water, there will be no farms.
Yeah, as we used to say up here, everyone lives downstream, and it's true. Whatever is done on your property doesn't just affect you, but it affects everybody downstream of you too. So that's why we work on this, because everyone is involved. So we were trying to wrap this up ideally by noon, and Mark and I would like to have field trips to sites that show unprotected rivers and streams, and sites that show well-protected rivers and streams. If you folks could help us with a list of places you think we should go visit, and then we'll work them into a field trip and carpool to the area. Do you have some idea? You could think about this now and then send us your ideas, and then we will schedule a field trip in the near future. Alicia?
What was the timing you were thinking on for that? Just out of curiosity.
Well, hopefully,
because all that vegetation's going to be dead soon.
Okay. Hopefully the leaves are still on the trees, because that makes a better impression when you're looking at it. It's hard to tell when the trees are leafless. So hopefully next couple of weeks.
Okay.
The north branches.
Yeah. You want to show us your parking lot, right?
Actually, there's a beautiful area that's been conserved by Hartford Seminary. And so typically I do this tour. It starts from the Connecticut Museum at 1 Elizabeth Street, which is a mere 15 minutes away from here.
That's easy.
Yeah. And it's a walk to Mark Twain's house. And you can see, combined sewage overflows and discharges, but there's also the east side of the stream on the west end, is a conserved, it's a forest that's been, it's there, it's intact, it's beautiful. And you can see the salt shed on the Yukon Law School land and the problems of the discharge from the salt shed in the floodplain. It's a host of issues, positive and negative, and it's a mere 15 minutes from here. And it's about an hour, 2-hour walk if you go up to the porch of Mark Twain's house.
Okay. Well, what we would like is if you would recommend sites for us to look at, we'll make a list. We'll try to group them so we can do them all in one area in one. To Casey. Yeah, if you have a suggested site for the field trip, and then
Well,
we'll
yes.
try to make it efficient.
I don't know if you want to do it at the other end of the state, but Greenwich is very interested in riparian buffers on the Byram River. And I've been working with them for some time on this, and they need a little bit of oomph. So if this were arranged with the Planning and Zoning Commission chair with Greenwich, I think they'd love it.
Okay.
So that's another option.
Well, just if you'd write it up and send it to us, we may not do them all, but we're going to do some. We want to see good examples and bad examples of riparian protection. Okay, so please send them in to Mr. Clerk and Mr. Larkin, and then we will put a trip together. Our next meeting is October 22nd. Is it 10, right?
Yes.
Okay. 10 a.m. And we will be looking at two things: Deep's current resources for working on these issues, and the current inland wetlands law. So we'll see you on. Or I should ask you, is there any other burning issue before we adjourn?
Actually, Rep. Mashinsky, I'd just like to jump in because it was mentioned before. I will put up a web page on the Environment Committee website for the working group, which will have membership, agendas, any other resources that we all might, need or that you would like to see up there. So stay tuned for that. Thank you.
And some of these appointments have a revolving set of, because they're busy people, they have a revolving set of alternates. And if you know who they are, we could put them up too.
Yeah, we'll work on getting a good system for
I don't have a
for
complete
identifying
book
that.
either, so.
Yeah, I understood. So
We'll
it's
try-
still in flux. We'll get it up there and put together so everyone will have
Okay.
everything
We
available.
greatly appreciate everybody donating their time and energy to this effort, and we hope it will produce good recommendations for the legislature.
And I looked at the agenda and was afraid we wouldn't have enough to talk about. Thank you.
So moved.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.